This month, right before the last presidential election, the 2020 election, we interviewed a former business partner of the Biden family. His name was Tony Bobulinski, and he told us a remarkable story. Joe Biden's son and his brother had entered into highly lucrative deals with foreign governments, including the Communist government of China, in which they sold access to the United States government in exchange for millions of dollars for themselves. Now, on many levels, that was a crime. Joe Biden was aware of it when it happened, and Joe Biden profited from it directly. It was a strong charge to make, but Tony Bobulinski had the documents, the emails, and the text messages to prove that it happened. We considered it a huge story, and we spent an hour on it in October of 2020. 2 years later, we still consider it a huge story. Yet in all of that time, no other major news organization in this country has bothered to follow up. The New York Times never interviewed Tony Bobulinski as part of an investigation into the Biden family's business deals, which is strange because he was a partner with the Biden family. But then neither has the Washington Post, neither have the other television networks. They've ignored it. The FBI, whose job it is to enforce federal law, did take a lengthy statement from Tony Bobulinski back in 2020, and during that conversation, he outlined several felonies the Bidens had committed, and he would know because he saw it. And then he provided extensive documentation to prove that it happened. The agency spoke to seemed shocked, and they promised to get back to Bobulinski for a follow-up interview. But they never did. In fact, the FBI never called Tony Bobulinski again. No one was ever indicted for these crimes. The investigation into them was squelched. To this day, the FBI continues to suppress evidence, proof, that the most powerful family in the country has committed crimes against the United States. That is the definition of corruption. It's unacceptable. If the United States is going to continue as a democratic republic, we can't have this. It cannot go on. Next month, voters will have a chance to change course. They will have the chance to repudiate the forces that have dangerously politicized and corrupted our law enforcement agencies. Before voters make that decision, we thought it was important that they hear once again from Tony Bobulinski. Over the last 2 years, he has learned quite a bit more about the business dealings, the criminal business dealings of the Biden family. So for the next hour, we're going to bring you our recent conversation with Tony Bobulinski. We're going to begin tonight with his firsthand experience with the FBI's cover-up of what the Biden family was doing. Here it is. Tony Bobulinski, thank you for coming. It's been 2 years since we've sat across from each other. Didn't expect to have a second interview with you. I'm grateful that we're able to. Thank you. So when we spoke before, you described what you believed were Hunter Biden and the Biden family's effectively offenses against the United States in ways that their business practices had undermined U.S. national security. But there was also an offense against you, what seemed like fraud. And now 2 years later, we have, I think, a pretty hard example of what that looked like. So if you wouldn't mind explaining to us, this is, I think, going back to the spring and summer of 2017, Sinohawk Holdings.
Okay.
What was that?
So Sinohawk Holdings was a Delaware LLC, which was effectively a partnership between the Biden family, myself, Rob Walker and James Gillier, and a Chinese large company called CEFC, which turned out to effectively be the capitalistic arm of, President Xi's One Belt, One Road.
Yes.
And so Sinohawk Holdings was the entity that Chairman Yi, who was the chairman of CFC, and an entity called Hudson West 4 owned 50% of Sinohawk Holdings, and an entity that represented the Biden family, myself, James Gillier and Rob Walker, called Oneida Holdings, owned the other 50% of that entity.
So at the beginning of this deal, the Chinese were supposed to send Sinohawk money. How much?
Yeah, so actually I'm glad you asked the question, because a lot of discussion has been about the $10 million the Chinese were supposed to fund into Sinohawk Holdings. $5 million of that was representing their 50%, and the $5 million, they would call it a loan to the Biden family, but effectively it was a loan to Oneida Holdings to represent the original operating capital. And that was just operating capital. That Sinohawk Holdings was set up to effectively deploy billions of dollars that CFC was claiming, and rightfully believable because they were doing it around the world, to invest via Sinohawk in infrastructure projects, technology companies, investment banks, financial institutions, both here in the U.S. and around the world.
So this is the limited liability company agreement of Sinohawk Holdings, and it says here May 2017. What is this?
So that's actually a very intense legal document that's drafted and details how Sinohawk Holdings will operate, who are the partners involved in the entity. It basically dictates how the business, who sits on the board of it, who will run it day to day. I was the CEO of Sinohawk Holdings, and I was vested with certain rights and authorities and stuff like that, and how you would distribute profits to the partners and stuff. So a very detailed document and fully executed. It's important because, when I came out in October 2020, a lot of people argued, well, that deal never happened. That deal 100% happened. That Sinohawk document that you're holding was fully executed, both by Jim Biden, Hunter Biden, myself, James Gilliar, Rob Walker, and then on the Chinese side, Hudson West 4 executed the document. So it was a fully operating business.
So here's a very strange document, and I hope you can explain it. This is a limited liability company agreement of BYZ Holdings, LLC. And this is from August 2nd of 2017, 3 months later. The reason this is strange is this document is identical, down to the serial numbers on the bottom of the page, to this document, the Sinohawk Holdings agreement, except it's got a different company name.
Yeah.
What is this?
So, interesting. So that document is exactly the same document as Sinohawk Holdings, LLC. And it appears that Hunter Biden, Jim Biden, and the Biden family literally copied the same document down to typos, as you said, the serial number, and they removed Oneida Holdings, which was the Delaware LLC that represented Jim Biden, Hunter Biden, myself, Rob Walker, and James Gilliar, and Hunter and his lawyer, George Maziers, replaced it with Owasco, which was Hunter Biden's law firm or business that he operated. So he effectively swapped out an entity that he owned 20% of to a business that he owned 100% of, which is fraud.
So why would he do that?
A lot of detail we don't, have too much
I understand,
time,
but basically...
At a high level in July 2017, the Chinese CFC had not funded the $10 million. I was extremely frustrated. The Bidens claimed or presented to be frustrated. I got calls from Jim Biden. He was ready to call the Chinese directly and say the Biden family's pulling out of a deal, all well documented in text messages, WhatsApp, and emails. And I didn't know this at the time, but apparently around that same time, Hunter Biden and his lawyers basically removed Oneida, put Owasco, his law firm, in that, and replaced that in that document, getting prepared to basically divert that money into BYZ Holdings.
So they were shafting you without your knowledge, it sounds like.
Yeah, it's called fraud, yeah.
And this is, I don't see any other explanation for this, do you?
I'm sure you can reach out to the Biden family and get comment from them.
They're not returning our calls right now. Okay, so this is, just this alone seems to me enough to spur a criminal investigation by the FBI into what apparently is fraud. The FBI had the contents of the laptop. They've had it for years now. Has there been an FBI investigation into this, and what's the outcome of it? Do you know?
I'm not aware of them focusing on those specific facts. Everything that I've been privy or briefed on is they're focusing on more legacy tax stuff, FARA stuff. They should be looking into that.
But Hunter Biden has not been indicted for this.
I'm not aware of that. He ultimately, if you actually want to get into more detail, they ultimately evolved from using BYZ Holdings to then just going directly into an entity called Hudson West 3, and that's where he received the, I think, over $5 million across 2017 and 2018, of which he took a portion and paid on a monthly basis to his uncle Jim Biden, and I think Jim's wife Sarah was involved. So,
how much did Hunter expect to make from his business dealings with the Chinese?
Yeah, so not only Hunter, I wasn't interested. They had to work on me for years to sort of, call it come off the bench and get involved here. In the spring of 2017, I expected CFC was going to deploy billions of dollars through Sinohawk, and I was focused on taking those billions of dollars and making a return on it. And I expected to make hundreds of millions of dollars. I think the Bidens probably thought they were going to make billions of dollars.
How much do you think Hunter, in the end, got from diverting this money? Do you think he received the money?
So he definitely received the money. I mean, the bank statements have been made public. He received over $5 million, and then I think an incremental $1 million in a legal consulting fee to represent Patrick Ho, which is a story in itself.
So this seems very cut and dried.
Black and white.
What Tony Bobulinski just described is a felony. It's fraud. It's a crime. He has the documents to prove it. We showed them to you. The FBI has those documents. What has the FBI done about this? We'll tell you after the break. Government officials are not allowed to sell access to the United States government. Even sitting vice presidents like Joe Biden are not allowed to do that. It's a crime. It is also a crime for anyone in the United States to commit fraud, to defraud their business partners. Now, in the portion of an interview that you just saw, Tony Bobulinski presented evidence, which we examined, that Hunter Biden did this. He committed fraud against Tony Bobulinski and his other business partners. The Biden family did that. Now, Bobulinski gave that evidence to the FBI. What happened next? We asked Tony Bobulinski. Now, since you are at the very center of the story, since you were the CEO of Sinohawk Holdings.
I wish I wasn't.
Right. Oh, I know that's right. And I want to ask you about that in a minute because it's a sad story. But since you are, as a factual matter, at the very center of this story, tell us about your personal interactions with the FBI.
So, well documented. I went to the second debate in Nashville between President Trump and Joe Biden.
My son has not made money in terms of this thing about, what are you talking about, China. I have not had, the only guy made money from China is this guy. He's the only one. Nobody else has made money from China.
That night I flew to D.C. and the next morning there was a big debate. Do I voluntarily walk into the FBI or do I go sit down with Senator Johnson and Senator Grassley? My lawyers decided it was better that I voluntarily go in to sit and provide these facts. And so in the morning of October 23rd, the morning after the debate, I spent 5+ hours sitting in a room with, at one point, I think as much as 6 federal agents, walking through all the facts of my knowledge of the Biden family, how I got involved in this, the trips around the world, CFC, Chairman Yi and stuff like that. At the end of that meeting, and remember, I voluntarily went there, so they were happy to take any information I provided to them. I wish I had pictures of the faces of the 2 main agents that were interviewing me, because I would say something and you could just see the shock in their face, and they would say, hey, let's take a minute. They'd get up and walk out of the room, and the agents would sort of convene and then come back and restart the interview, because these facts are just for the sake of our country, for national security. At that point, he was candidate Joe Biden. Now he's the sitting president of the United States, the most powerful person in the free world, and daunting. So at the end of that 5+ hour interview, the head of station told my lawyers, listen, an individual named Tim Tebow is going to run point on all of this. We're definitely going to have Tony come back in for a follow-up interview, could be as early as next week. Some of the people that were in the room weren't well versed on all these facts. We may want to have people come in from Baltimore or Delaware. And, I was ready to sit down with anybody that needed me to or travel wherever I wanted to. And so the head of station gave my lawyers Tim Tebow's cell phone number. Tim was not there that day. I think he was out of Washington, D.C. But my lawyers had an hour and a half call with him that Friday night, October 23rd, and subsequent calls through the weekend and the following week when I was then coming on your show to provide the facts to the American people. And they were supposed to be working a follow-up interview. And Tim Tebow, in his last discussion with my legal counsel, was, listen, we know Tony's cooperating. We appreciate all the information he's provided. We will follow up with you. We're definitely going to have him come in for a follow-up interview or spend some more time on this. And I haven't heard from him since.
At all?
No. Nor have my lawyers.
No communication whatsoever?
No.
Since before the 2020 election?
Correct.
That's shocking.
Shocking, yeah, that would be one adjective, yeah.
Tell us about Tim Tebow.
I didn't interact with him, my lawyers
Right.
did, and had extensive discussions. Obviously, all this information very sensitive, and how it was being handled, the images off my cell phones, detailed, WeChat discussions with the Chinese, wires changing. Just the amount of information here is staggering.
And the FBI took possession of that information.
They did. I don't know where it went.
So
I do know, to your point earlier of one of the reasons why I'm sitting here, during the summer, there's been all this discussion now about whistleblowers coming forward to Senator Grassley, Senator Johnson, Congressman Jordan, Congressman Comer. I mean, it sounds like they're coming out, out of the woodwork, and I think it will continue to accelerate. And apparently a variety of these whistleblowers claim that Tim Tebow was suppressing facts. So imagine I'm actually in Europe traveling, and I'm starting to see these, I call my lawyers monthly. Why haven't I been called in front of a grand jury? Well, this makes no sense to me. They said they were going to follow up within a week and do follow-up interviews. And my lawyers were just, let the process work through. I had respect for, obviously, our country. I was trying to respect the Department of Justice and let them work through. But then when you hear the person that you're told was assigned to run point on thousands of documents and text messages and calendars and, travel arrangements and all that, that individual just walked out of the FBI headquarters in D.C., you've got to start asking questions.
And the allegation is that he's a partisan actor acting on behalf of effectively the Democratic Party. That's the allegation about
Yeah,
Tim.
apparently multiple whistleblowers have come forward and claimed that, correct.
Would you speak to the FBI again?
I'd be happy to.
At any time?
At any time. Not just the FBI, the U.S. Attorney. I mean, these facts are extensive, well-documented, easily verified, metadata, multiple sources saying the same thing. Zero chance that this has anything to do with Russia or disinformation.
So we've heard repeatedly accounts that there is or was a grand jury impaneled in Delaware.
Yeah.
What do you know about that?
I know one thing, I haven't been called in front of them, and which is surprising, disappointing, I don't know.
You were the business partner of the Biden family.
Some people say, aren't you happy that you didn't have to go through and sit in front of people for 20 hours getting asked 1,000 questions? And I say, no, our country deserves the facts. They need to know about the facts. And when you have a media and, some of the biggest tech companies, Facebook, Twitter, publicly acknowledging that they did suppress the story, Jack Dorsey at Twitter publicly acknowledging it was a mistake.
We made a total mistake with the New York Post. We corrected that within 24 hours. It was not to do with the content. It was to do with a hacked materials policy. We changed that based on they're not wanting to delete that tweet, which I completely agree with. I see it, but it is something we learn.
There wasn't a do-over. We didn't get to go back and fix that history was altered. This is history-altering facts. Debate with anybody. Put me in a room with anybody that claims anything I've said, any document I've produced is altered or fabricated. I'd love that challenge.
FBI Director Chris Wray dispatched his agents on the largest manhunt in American history to apprehend and incarcerate hundreds of middle-aged people with no criminal records for trespassing in the United States Congress when the Capitol Police lifted the guards and let them in. That's what they've been spending their time doing. But not one FBI agent could call Tony Bobulinski back, who presented them hard documentary evidence of felonies the Biden family committed. How is that not corruption? And who's behind it? That's straight ahead. One thing you can never have in a democracy is powerful law enforcement agencies working secretly to affect election outcomes. Because if that happens, you are no longer a democracy. You're something much less than that. That's the single greatest possible threat to our system, far greater than any foreign interference, is interference from our own federal law enforcement agencies. And yet that happened in the last election. The FBI told social media companies, the most powerful media companies in the world, to censor the Tony Bobulinski story. That is election interference at the highest level, and that happened. We asked Bobulinski about that. So I have to ask, after our first hour-long interview that we did 2 years ago, right before the presidential election of 2020, your story was effectively suppressed. I mean, it was literally suppressed by other news organizations. We know a lot more now about how and why that was suppressed. It was pretty obvious then. How did you feel as a veteran and a demonstrably patriotic American seeing censorship in your own country for political reasons? What was your reaction to that?
That time was a crazy time, as you can imagine, just for my family, for myself, wanting to do the right thing for the sake of our country, very patriotic. And I was disappointed, angry, because as you said, you spent, the time I've served this country, my family, my credibility as a businessman, and I can't find another story in the history of our country that has been actually so suppressed. Suppressed actually is a complete blackout. You can go to CNN.com today and search my last name, and it still shows you 0 results. There has not been one credible interview, debate on refuting anything I've said or any piece of evidence. So I was angry when I watched this play out, especially when 5 weeks later, the DOJ announces that, they're formally investigating Hunter Biden and the Biden family, and they make that public. It was 5 weeks too late, and the American people deserve those facts before the election.
But a lot of people couldn't get the facts because Facebook, which is the single largest disseminator of information in the country, suppressed those facts, and now we know why.
Yeah, imagine that. I think it's in the last month that Mark Zuckerberg was being interviewed by Joe Rogan, who he's just a straight shooter, right? I think it's a 3-hour format, and he asks a lot of questions, and a very smart guy.
There was a lot of attention on Twitter during the election because of the Hunter Biden laptop story, the New York Post.
Yeah, we had that too.
Yeah, so you guys censored that as well?
So we took a different path than Twitter. Basically the background here is the FBI, I think, basically came to us, some folks on our team, and was like, hey, just so you know, you should be on high alert. There was we thought that there was a lot of Russian propaganda in the 2016 election. We have it on notice that basically there's about to be some kind of dump of that's similar to that. So just be vigilant.
He used the word dump. Right? He said the FBI briefed us that a dump might be coming. They didn't say there might be a story, the dump. The FBI was well aware there was a laptop, well aware there were hundreds of thousands of emails and text message and stuff like that, and they had to be aware of the chatter that ultimately the New York Post published a couple of emails trying to make the American public aware of it. But Mark Zuckerberg just casually said, oh yeah, the FBI came to us and warned us of a dump. So when the New York Post ran their article, individual named Andy Stone stepped in. I think he runs their compliance or fact-checking department, and throttled down the fact pattern. The interesting thing with that, Tucker, is Andy Stone never reached out to me. He never called my lawyers. My email address was there. I'm easy to get a hold of. Facebook never reached out to me and said, hey, Tony, we see that this email that the New York Post just published to you, is it real? Can you produce the email to us? Within 5 minutes, if Twitter, Facebook, anybody else had reached out, I would have produced the email with, everyone wants to talk about the metadata. Oh, the emails that are being produced don't have any metadata. I would have given them the metadata that's pages long on that email that the New York Post published. And so you originally started this chain by, how did it make me feel? Angry, disappointed, and felt like I had to go out and educate the American
But take
people.
3 steps back. I mean, this was an extraordinarily close election, which is to say it was determined in real life by a very small number of votes.
Yep, 21,500 votes. I don't think your audience, which is a large one, probably understands or is really thinking about it today. But if you go back to October 2020 and then into the November 3rd election, the election was decided by 21,500 votes. And what does that mean? 3 states, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona. The difference between President Trump and Joe Biden was 43,000 votes. If half of those people, 21,500, had voted for President Trump instead of Biden, President Trump would still be in the White House. Now, I'm not arguing for that or supporting that. That is fact based on what was recorded in actual votes. So that election was decided by 21,500 votes in the backdrop of a story that is the most suppressed story in the history of a U.S. presidential election.
So if we now know that that story was suppressed by a federal agency, the FBI, our biggest law enforcement agency, then how did the FBI not affect the election outcome? It sounds like the election was, I'll just say it, rigged in part by the FBI.
It was. It was. So you can call it rigged, you can call it stolen, you could call it suppressed. The American people can call it whatever they want, but the fact pattern is the FBI alone altered history in that election.
Did anyone at the New York Times or the Washington Post ever call you?
So I've had a variety of people reach out to me, but nobody that was willing to actually go through a detailed interview of the facts. And, Jake Tapper, I guess well respected by many people at CNN, I appeal to him and Chris Licht. I'll come for an interview. We'll spend an hour. You can be as aggressive as you want to be with me. You can call me a liar. You can, attack the facts. The good news is it's just not my word against the Bidens. I have thousands of documents, text messages, WhatsApp conversations, recordings of the sitting president of the United States in his own voice. And I'd love to have that debate. So.
And you offered that?
I'm available. Yeah, I've said, I've had people reach out to me, and I've said, listen, what's the, they just want something. They want something for a news cycle or this going, and I have not done that. I've been laying low, but I'm offering that now.
So you would go on CNN and speak at whatever length they'd like.
I would go on Jake Tapper tonight if he wants to interview me.
How has no one followed up on the story? If you work in journalism, you get a lot of people calling you, I'm a whistleblower, they all want something. This guy doesn't want anything. He doesn't need anything. This doesn't help him at all. But he's got something real to say. And by the way, it wasn't just Joe Biden's ne'er-do-well, drug-addicted son doing flaky stuff in foreign countries. This was Biden's brother, too, and both of them were helping Joe Biden. Joe Biden was directly involved in a family influence peddling operation while he was vice president of the United States. More from bobulinski after the break. What's amazing in retrospect is that 2 years ago, when this story first broke, the usual liars and power worshippers in the media, those of whom the rare few who even acknowledged that Tony Bobulinski existed, dismissed the story by saying, well, yeah, but it's Biden's son. It had nothing to do with Biden. As if Hunter Biden would be able to make millions of dollars in, say, Ukraine or China on the basis of his own expertise, which amounted to precisely nothing. He'd never had a real job. He had no skills. How was he getting so rich? Because his dad was the vice president. That's how. They were selling access to the United States government with Joe Biden's brother. And the money was in part going to Joe Biden. And that was all very clear because Hunter Biden said it repeatedly on text that any news organization could have read. But Tony Bobulinski already knew that because he saw that. He'd already met with Joe Biden directly. So we asked him again about this. Put some flesh on those bones. And he did. Watch. So you were business partners with Hunter and Jim Biden, Joe Biden's son and brother.
Correct.
Both of them, Hunter Biden has received some coverage for his art.
I call it the Biden family because, as you know, it's been I say well documented. You well documented it, but I met with Joe multiple times.
Yes.
And now, subsequent to the election, he's now the sitting president of the United States. But there are hundreds of data points that Joe Biden was acting in a capitalistic term, I would say the chairman. The chairman of J.P. Morgan doesn't take 8 meetings down with the people, analyzing companies. The chairman serves a purpose, right? He's a figurehead. He shows up at meetings, shakes hands, advises, has faith in his team. Effectively, that was Joe Biden's role in the Biden family business ventures and around the world. And not just my venture. I met with him multiple times. I think it was the Daily Mail that made a recording public where Joe Biden reaches out to Hunter Biden in December 2018 after the New York Times had published an extensive article on CFC Chairman Yi and how they were deploying billions of dollars around the world with different governments basically acting as the capitalistic arm of One Belt, One Road.
So I'd like to play that voicemail. This is from the sitting president of the United States. This is from Joe Biden to his son, Hunter.
Hey, pal, Dad. It's 8:15 on Wednesday night. If you get a chance, give me a call. Nothing urgent. Just want to talk to you. I thought the article, at least the thing online, this is going to be printed tomorrow in the Times, was good. I think it's clear. And anyway, if you get a chance, give me a call. I love you.
I mean, that's it.
That's staggering. The sitting president of the United States, but that's Joe Biden in his own voice telling the American people, I was always well aware of the business ventures my family was involved in, so much so I could tell my son I read a detailed article that has 50 facts in it. Imagine just sitting in a room with national security and the intel agencies with that article, talking about corruption, talking about China, talking about the Chinese Communist Party, the Liberation Army of China. Joe Biden is saying, I read that article and you're in the clear, Hunter. And he leaves that voicemail for his son.
So do you think that the Bidens were aware of the effects on the United States of doing business with China?
It's funny. I think in their mind they view Russia as a bigger threat than China. They sort of talk and operate like that, which was always surprising to me. But I think they're well aware of it. The magnitude, Hunter in his own words talks about being in business with the spy chief of China.
Did you ever talk to Hunter Biden directly about this?
Obviously, I was aware of what was being done in 2015 and 2016 by James Gilliar and Rob Walker with the Chinese company CFC while Joe Biden was still the sitting vice president of the United States. There was a text message where I was early on having discussions with Hunter about, what is CFC focused on and Chairman Yi? Are they doing any deal or what kind of deals? And Hunter in a very long text message just says, we're willing to do any deals except I think he excluded, military tech that would give the Chinese military an advantage over the United States military. But outside of that, they were ready and willing to do any other deal.
So you said they viewed Russia, and it's clearly true that they do, as a bigger threat than China, and as someone who has worked around the world, you think that's ludicrous. But they were also willing to do business deals with Russia, correct?
They were. And there's a very well documented, Senator Johnson and Senator Grassley, and sadly enough, it came out after the election, but they initially published a report in September 2020. 2 weeks after the election, in November 2020, they published a 70-page document that's publicly available to anybody that's watching this that wants to review it, that goes through in detail the involvement of Hunter Biden and the Biden family with knowledge of a deal that was being struck between CFC buying a $9 billion stake in the U.S.-sanctioned, Russian-controlled by Putin energy company, and writing a $9 billion check. They weren't a silent partner and, we're going to put $9 million or $90 million or $900 million. They were buying a $9 billion stake, approximately 14% of Rosneft, once again, U.S.-sanctioned, Putin-controlled Russian energy company, and Hunter Biden and the Biden family were right in the middle of all of that.
Have you had any contact with Hunter or Jim Biden?
No, the last contact I had with the Biden family is actually when I was in my interview with the FBI on October 23rd for that 5+ hours. On my BlackBerry, Jim Biden called me via WhatsApp. And, I was there voluntarily, but so my phone starts ringing in the middle of this interview. So I looked down and I'm like, I'm like, is he really calling me right now? So I show the phone to my lawyer, and he's like, and then I show it to the agents. The agents got up out of their chair and left the room. They were like, you can take that call if you want. And so I answered it, and there was nobody on the other side. So I don't know if it was a mistake, or they were trying to send me a message, or what it was. But that's the last interaction or communication I've had with the Biden family.
So you are the key to this story, and there's a lot at stake.
I wish I wasn't, but yeah.
Of course. You didn't choose it, obviously. But you are, and there's an awful lot at stake. Are you concerned about what the consequences might be for you and your family?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I've my immediate family, my extended family. I'm concerned, but the good news is they're all patriots. You know, we all bleed red, white, and blue. We believe in this country, the greatest country in the world, hands down. And these facts matter. I don't matter. The facts matter. And the American people deserve to know them and verify them, and ask their senators and congressmen to verify them, and ultimately hold the Biden family and the current administration accountable for them. Imagine this, to this day, 2 years, Joe Biden is yet to be asked, did he ever meet with me?
Not one time.
Not one time.
So we've had 2 years to look into you. We looked into you before our first interview. And I should say, just because I think our viewers should know, you know, we've interviewed a lot of whistleblowers. I have over 30 years, more than. And, you know, a lot of them are telling the truth, probably most, but almost all of them want something. And we can say, because we verified it, you're not actually looking for anything. You don't need the money, that's for sure. It's only downside for you. And that's one of the reasons we were confident enough in you to do a second interview. Why are you coming out now again?
I'm coming out now because American people still are being lied to about the facts, right? Nothing's been done. They're still thinking, oh, that deal never happened, or, you know, Hunter Biden was a troubled child. They're not aware of the tens of millions of dollars, the thousands of, you know, pages of documentation and the facts. The DOJ is claiming they had to couch this. They can't do anything near an election. I don't want to be sitting here in December and they actually indict Hunter Biden, and then the American people are like, why weren't we made aware of those facts? This is crazy. I would have changed my vote for that congressman or that senator or that governor or that attorney general. So that's why I'm coming out now. And as I referenced earlier, I came back from summer travel to find out that the person that was running point on the trove of documents and text messages that were provided to the FBI just suddenly retired and walked out of the building.
Does it, I mean, you've got the most powerful agencies in the world, the FBI and the CIA, working against you. That's not an overstatement. We've seen it happen.
Yeah.
I mean, that's...
You just made my heart skip, but...
It's true. And that's quite an array of opponents.
Red, white, and blue. Greatest country on the face of the earth. I believe facts matter, and the truth ultimately will come out.
Did you hear that? He just said that Joe Biden's brother called him while he was talking to the FBI. How would Joe Biden's brother know he was talking to the FBI? Who's running the FBI? Well, his name is Chris Wray. We now know that the FBI suppressed the story. They never called Bobulinski back, never did a second interview, and then they called the social media companies to censor it to influence the outcome of a presidential election. Has that ever happened? Why is this man still running the FBI? Why has no one asked him about it? Also bewildering. Miranda Devine knows more about this subject than any living person. She joins us after the break. By the way, we've got a full documentary on this, on the Biden family business dealings. Tony Bobulinski is a big part of that, and we'll see it later this fall on Fox. So that was our about hour-long conversation with Tony Bobulinski. The person we know who knows more about the business dealings of the Biden family, probably than any other living person other than the Bidens, is the New York Post's Miranda Devine, who wrote a fantastic book on it called The Laptop from Hell. She joins us tonight. Miranda, thanks so much. There's so much to discuss, and I hope we will later, but I just have to, the fact that the vice president's brother, Jim Biden, called Tony Bobulinski in the middle of an FBI interview, that just stuck out to me. What do you think that means?
Yeah, me too. How did he know to call him then? Did someone tip off Jim Biden that Tony Bobulinski was in there spilling the beans on the family's Chinese deal and the millions of dollars that they made from it? You can only wonder. When Tony Bobulinski showed the FBI agents that phone, they scurried out of the room as fast as they could and said, take it, take it. So he took the call and there was just air on the other end. So he never heard from the Bidens again. But that is just one of the many kind of sinister and peculiar aspects of this. And look, that interview that you had with Tony Bobulinski was fantastic. And the courage of the man, I think, came out when you asked him about the fact, that he has the FBI and the CIA, the full might of these incredibly powerful institutions arrayed against him. And he said, yes, you just made my heart skip. And this is a guy who is a decorated former naval officer. He has top secret security clearances from the NSA and the Department of Energy. He's a tough guy. And yet he is being put in such an enormous amount of stress. And it all comes down to the FBI and the cover-up. And I think we're seeing with this story that the story of the cover-up is now bigger than the story of the original corruption. Yes. The FBI knew when Tony Bobulinski came to them 11 days before the 2020 election that you could not get a witness more credible than he is. And they knew that what he was saying was correct about the influence peddling scheme.
Thank you for saying that about his bravery. His courage gives the rest of us heart, and I'm just grateful for that. And for you.